Within the past couple years, I recently went through some of Remedy's past titles like Alan Wake 1 and 2 along with Control. After going through those games, the main thing I realized was how interconnected this entire universe was. Releasing in 2016 for the Xbox One and PC, I never got the chance to play this, but I recently had a free trial of PC Gamepass, so I finally decided to give this game a try. And the results were interesting.
Choice.
Before I even get into the gameplay itself, I have to address this particular port. As I already mentioned, I played this game on PC Gamepass thinking that this game was in a good playable state. However, as soon as I started the game and the opening cutscene crashed, I knew I was in for a tough time, and this was just the start. I would say about 85% of the cutscenes in the entire game either stuttered, crashed, or had this weird rainbow-like glitch, completely messing up the scene. And this rainbow glitch wasn't present in just the cutscenes, but in the gameplay as well. Nevertheless, I pushed through and completed this game in its entirety, as I don't give up just because of some bugs. Regardless, I just wanted to be transparent, as you'll see over the course of this review the graphical issues that occurred during my playthrough. It really is a shame this port is so bad because the game is pretty good, but let's move on. The gameplay in Quantum Break was actually a lot better than I was expecting. Going into this game, I had no idea what it was going to play like. As I started playing it, it felt really good. The increased frame rate playing on PC made the movement smooth as butter, so moving Jack was always easy to do. No parts of the gameplay felt janky or slow, like everything moved as it was supposed to. We'll get to the story later, but your character Jack gets these time-related powers that let him perform some cool time-manipulating feats. You could stop time completely, time dash, create time explosions, among other abilities. All of these were performed by simply pressing or holding a button on your controller. What I liked about these abilities is that you had the option to use them however you wanted. For the majority of all the encounters, there isn't a set way of how to defeat the enemies. You can choose literally any method of attack that you want. I'd be lying if I said that I abused the powers, because my first instinct was to use the weapons and only the powers when I really needed them. But when I did use the powers, my main go-to was the dash. This time dash power gave you the ability to stop time and literally run by enemies and their attacks. You can imagine how OP this was. You could evade entire attacks and bullets from groups of enemies, allowing you to find cover so you could heal. The other powers are cool too, but I only used them when I had to, not as a first option, as you have to sort of rebuild structures that become damaged from an event so you can use them to traverse to another area. You do have the ability to upgrade these powers too by using points to increase something about them. It could be increased focus or increased strength, but regardless of what upgrade you choose, it's going to help you out. Again, I emphasize that I'm a sucker for games that put player choices to focus, so choosing what powers you want to upgrade and rely on is completely up to you. If these powers showed me anything, it's like they served as a test run for what we got in Control. Yes, they're different as Jack's powers are surrounding time, but I think they were done better in Control, which makes sense because that game released 3 years after this title. Maybe I wouldn't think that if I played this on release, but the entire power system was cool, but I never felt the need to rely on it. I did play on normal though, so maybe if it was on hard I would have leaned more into them than I did. Either way, I think the best way to use these is in conjunction with the guns that you have at your disposal. In my opinion, I think the gunplay is the shining star of this gameplay. It may be kind of surprising because you would think that a game centered around time travel would have the time abilities be the most fun, right? Well, I didn't think so. Using literally any gun was very satisfying. You had the option to hold 3 weapons at a time, and all of them were worth using. Between the pistols, machine guns, and shotguns, any one of these were effective. Just like the powers, you're not forced to use any of these, but the way the game is made, you need to. In my playthrough, I found out early that the shotgun and rifle are both OP. Both take out weapons quickly, whereas the other weapons will take some extra bullets. Over the course of the game, you're going to encounter these annoying ass enemies that resemble the Juggernaut from Call of Duty. For these guys, you're going to want to use the shotgun. Thank me later. Now, just because you can use a bunch of different guns doesn't mean that you can just burn through your ammo. When going through encounters, you're going to face enemies from all directions, meaning you have to shoot a lot. Eventually, you will run out of bullets, so when this happens, you have 2 options. Grab another gun from somewhere in the area, or find these backpacks on the ground that contain ammo. For me, I always tried finding the bags full of ammo. What I did was save the time dash for when I ran out of ammo and would slow everything down so I could go ahead and grab some before continuing the fight. Now you might be thinking, that's cool that you can do that, but how do you remember where the ammo bag is since you're running all around the place? Well, that's a great question. The game gives you this ability to see all the important objects in an area like enemies, exploding cans, ammo bags, and areas of interest. Use this in the middle of battle and you'll never forget where the ammo bag is. Abuse this strategy and you'll breeze right through the game. To sum it up, the gunplay is really good in this game, so good that I would forget to use the power sometimes. In regards to the platforming, I'm kinda torn on this. It's not bad at all, as you have to use time in order to restore buildings and structures so you can make your way across. This got kind of old as the game went on, but I get why it was used so much. You literally have the ability to rewind time, so making levels where you had to use that mechanic made complete sense. On the other hand, the condition of the port hindered my experience in this area some. So when you're traversing these areas and going from place to place, you are able to miss your jumps and die. And when this happens, you're supposed to restart from where you left off, as the checkpoints in this game are pretty forgiving, except for this one moment that I encountered. Late in the game, you have to climb across this bridge area with a whole bunch of time-altering moments and jumps you need to make. Well, me being me, I died over the course of this long section. But the annoying thing is that every time I died, the game put me on the bridge right before this fight against a juggernaut and some soldiers. So every time I died going across the bridge, I had to redo this fight before even getting to the part that I died at. Really dumb. But after a handful of attempts doing this, something happened. When the checkpoint loaded, I started on the bridge right before the jump where I died. So this entire sequence I was going through was due to the game not loading me back at the correct checkpoint. Again, this issue is not related to the traversal itself, but yeah, this sucked. It wouldn't be a Remedy game if a lot of the plot and information was told in areas outside the story. For this particular game, you're going to be fed an absurd amount of emails. The amount of computers with information on them is actually crazy, but the intel you receive is worthwhile. Most of the time it's depicting information you already know or giving some sort of context into what's going on in the story. Because this game has a lot of time jumping, these info nuggets help sort of piece everything together. I did like how none of these were required, so it's not like the game is forcing you to read every single piece of data, but I do think it's worth at least glancing at some of these emails. I would say don't read every little detail because some of these messages are literal pages long, and it would take a couple minutes in real time to not only read it, but comprehend it as well. But as I already mentioned, if you played a Remedy game before, then this is nothing new. Earlier I mentioned that this game puts an emphasis on player choice, and that extends beyond your gameplay as Jack. You also play as the antagonist of the game, Paul, and during his gameplay segments you have the option to pick how the story would unfold. Due to the nature of his powers, he can see how things will play out based on whatever decision he makes. It kinda reminds you of like Until Dawn with the choices, but the twist is that you know the outcome of each decision, and you have to choose which one you like the most. I thought this was a really cool way to help make your playthrough feel unique compared to others. Especially if you have friends that have played the game before, then you can ask them what they chose for certain situations versus what you did. Now I didn't think there was always a correct option to pick either, making this entire mechanic even better. If the game had this sort of gameplay in there but made the correct choice obvious, then that would defeat the entire purpose. I think the way this feature was implemented in Quantum Break was done really well, and I would love to see this come back in another story-driven game. It would add something fresh that we don't see often. The last thing I wanted to bring up was the final fight. It could just be me, but I thought the final fight could have been designed better. You fight Paul, who like I mentioned has his own powers, but instead of getting in a reasonable distance and going at it, he stands up on a platform and performs this giant explosion, like he's doing Vegeta's final explosion from Dragon Ball Z. There's then the enemies that pop up from the elevator that you have to kill, along with the floor glowing red, which I'm assuming is Paul using his powers. In its entirety, the gameplay for Quantum Break is fun. It's smooth, and the combination of powers and gunplay makes it a deadly combination to use during each encounter. The predictability of these encounters may make them a bit trivial after a while, but for the most part, they're always fun. Using time powers to fight enemies or reach high ledges and platforms was done well, but this definitely feels like the foundation and not an evolution of anything, which is completely okay. If you enjoy action games, you'll have a good time with this. The story for Quantum Break is like trying to piece together one of those 1,000-piece puzzles. There's so much information being thrown at you, it can be hard to remember everything. Like I said earlier, outside the cutscenes, there's so much data on the computers and files that reading isn't a requirement, but rather a necessity. Just skipping out on these will leave out so much, as these fill in a lot of the blanks after the main story scenes have ended. Avoiding spoilers, you play as Jack Joyce as he tries to fix time after a time machine malfunctioned and literally broke reality. The entire game is you trying to find this countermeasure his brother built in order to undo the damage that happened when the time machine broke. Over the course of this story, you'll meet different characters with their own agendas, all affecting the plot in some way. I liked how the story is not nearly as linear as I made it out to be. After a certain point, you'll start jumping from year to year with reveal after reveal happening at the same time. And as you go about fixing it, you jump jump across the entire timeline of events that led to that moment. And when I mean the entire timeline, I mean the whole thing. Going from one thing to the next was like adding a puzzle piece or answering a question that you may have had from earlier. It can all get a bit overwhelming if you're not paying attention. Depending on the type of gamer you are, you may not like this style of storytelling. Some may prefer when everything is black and white with no variance or mystery in between. For me, I don't mind a little bit of both. I think that trying to figure out why things are happening without any context clues does make you try a bit harder to fully grasp all the information at hand. Leaving it up to the player to get a grip on what's going on is a decision that some may like and others won't. But it is refreshing to play a game where not everything is spoon-fed to you. If you've seen any of my other videos, I mentioned that I always get too attached to the female love interest in these type of action-like games, and this game was no different. At first, when we were introduced to Beth Wilder, I was like, yo, that's Jessie from Control. But then after that, her character really grew on me. She was there all along the way, helping us take down Monarch, the company that Paul ran, as we continued on the mission to fix time. The more obvious it became that she's one of the few people that you could trust. And once you get further in the plot, you could see her true motivations and why she was so invested into helping us in the first place. All of this was a big twist that I definitely didn't see coming and just made me like her character even more. I won't say what happens to her by the end of the game, but yeah, let's just say I'm glad we had time powers, or I would have been pissed. At the start of this video, I said that this universe seems interconnected with other games like Alan Wake and Control, and after going through this story, this definitely confirmed my suspicions. As a matter of fact, before the bridge moment I spoke about earlier, you're in this building where you can see a TV with night springs on it, a reference to Alan Wake. Later on, as you're going through the university with your brother, you can see written on the chalkboard a whole bunch of information about Alan Wake and everything to do with that game. Seeing all this made me so happy that I played the other games, because this just adds more mystery to the entire plot. Like, by messing with the time in this game, does this have any effect on anything in the other two games? There's no way that by manipulating time in Quantum Break won't do anything at all to something in Alan Wake, especially considering the connections that are already present. Again, I'm sure there's people out there with answers to those questions, but for a first playthrough, all of this came rushing to my head as I kept playing. By the time you reach the end of the game, I'm sure you'll be satisfied with how the story ends, as everything that started from the beginning is concluded in a solid manner. You know where you leave off, and you finish explaining everything that happened with it being clear what Jack intends to do next. Of course, the decisions you make affect the road to that destination, but either way, I was satisfied with how this plot was told, even if I had to connect the dots to so many different things. Overall, Quantum Break is a solid game that is hindered by an awful port. I'm sure that if I played this game in its original state, I wouldn't have had any of those graphical issues, but that just wasn't the case. The gameplay is fun, even if using the powers wasn't as effective as I thought it'd be. I enjoyed the story a lot, and it was fun putting everything together and trying to fix time. If a sequel to this game was made, I'd be all for it, as long as I had a couple tweaks. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game a 7.5. Again, I reiterate that this game is worth playing, but only if you own the game and have an Xbox to play it on. I hope the Steam release of this game is better than the PC Gamepass version, but who knows. If this game was in a better state for my playthrough, I would have rated this higher, but I just can't do it because of how bad this port was. Regardless, I do recommend giving this game a chance, as it's one of the more unique games I've played over the years. What did you think about Quantum Break? Did you like this more than Alan Wake, or do you prefer one of Remedy's other games? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to watch one of my other reviews right here.